Hello, everyone. I'm Jamie Flinchbaugh, host of People Solve Problems, and today we have Ryan McCormack as our guest today. Ryan, how you doing?
Can't complain other than the weather out here. How are you, Jamie?
I'm great. My weather is windy. Yours is cold. So it's okay. We're both inside chatting on Zoom. Um, so by way of introduction, Ryan is the director of Operational Readiness and Optimization for the Wawanesa Mutual Company in Winnipeg. He's had over 2 decades in seeking to understand and apply principles that enrich the working lives of people who work in large organizations. You've worked in manufacturing, healthcare, management consulting, and insurance, uh, and currently live in Winnipeg. So, beautiful city. And so, welcome to the show. Let's talk about problem solving.
Let's do it.
Um, so first, especially in your role, operational readiness and optimization, you get to touch probably a lot of different things in a lot of different teams. How do you talk? How do you think about your role in problem solving? Are you a sponsor, an owner, a facilitator, a coach? Does it change depending on the circumstances?
Yeah, it definitely changes depending on the circumstances. But these days, primarily my role is more on the sort of consultant facilitator side, especially because I lead a team of folks who probably are more active in owning problem solving or being part of a team that's directly trying to solve a problem. Um, but quite often too, you also have to decide whether you're going to like how hands on or how hands off you're going to be on the problem solving. Uh, Years ago, I learned a bit of it's called a framework is pretty generous, but I remember working with a lady named Margie Hagany. She was part of the Healthcare Value Leader Network and then part of the Catalysis faculty at this point in time. She's pretty legendary for anyone who's worked with her. And she would always, start by asking questions to determine what your role should be. And those questions are usually in service to, understanding the capability of the people who probably own the problem, and the complexity of the problem. And just by using that in your judgment, your experience, you can kind of decide whether you should be more hands on or hands off, more directive or more coaching. So it's simple. You just start by asking questions and then, decide from there whether it is your problem to own. Are you trying to develop skills or is there some urgency around it and you just have to get after it?
So it's a sort of a combination of, I'll say, readiness factors, but also business factors, kind of what's at play in the situation, and you have to weigh a range of those as you make that decision.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, in a perfect world, yes, you always confer ownership to the person who's closest to the problem, and you develop them. But sometimes there's just urgency around it, or the skills, patience, and capability aren't there, and you still have to solve the problem. So I've had to learn that over time. I'm a bit of an idealist. I'm always like, oh well, I shouldn't step in here or I shouldn't get involved. But sometimes it is your job to get involved or offer up your expertise just to get it across the finish line.
Yeah. I think that is a hard thing for an idealist to learn. You're a firefighter instructor, but at some point somebody has to grab the hose, and if the fire has to be put out. Um, Let me ask a little bit more about that in the context of a team of problem solvers. So not just you, of course, but your team. How do you evaluate? I assume capacity of your team is part of that equation, and but problem solving is nonlinear and very hard to put a very definitive block around. So how do you evaluate your team's capacity to solve problems when every problem is a little bit different?
Yeah, that's a great question. My team's made up of people who usually come in for not forever on the team. Ideally, they kind of rotate in and out, and we pull them from the operations. typically you find these people because you've seen them in action. They've been part of a problem solving team, or they've expressed an interest. So that's half the battle right there. Is, do they have the will? Do they love to solve problems? Is that because that's really hard to teach in my experience. I generally believe most people do enjoy solving problems, but there are some that just want to come and punch the clock and go home at the end of the day, and they're great too. So yeah, I fortunately I don't have to teach a will or joy of solving problems. Um, there's a set of base capabilities that we focus on my team. It's kind of a mix of your technical problem solving skills and your people's skills, but also your consulting and coaching skills. And different people have different needs and their journey on that, and it's my job to kind of assess where they're at on each of those, and whether it's me helping them with a specific capability or connecting them to the right person, resource, or supports to help them develop the other capabilities. My goal is just to make them a well-rounded problem solver, but also put them in situations where they can be successful. So sometimes that means matching them up with the right problem or the right area, the right personalities, which is great because it means I have to have a diverse group on my team. So that's not only great for adding flexibility to the team and the organization, but it's also great for me selfishly because I get to learn a lot more from people from different areas and different stripes.
Yeah. I love how you frame that. It's hard to teach the will or the joy. So you sort of, recruit for that, and
Absolutely.
want that already in place. You can teach them the skills. And I think uh, that's really insightful how you framed it that way. Um, there's a lot of people out there, a lot of companies out there that put together, I'll say, problem solving teams in some degree. And one of the age old debates in putting together a team like that is, do you want sort of people that are going to spend a long, long time there, meaning that's their career? They are a facilitator, trainer, coach of problem solving, and they just develop expertise, and that's what they do. Or let's rotate people in and out, give them some skills, send them back in the organization. And I thought I heard a hint of the strategy in there, but just to elaborate, could you tell me where you fall on that spectrum of the strategy for staffing your team, and why that's the strategy?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's as deliberate as it's just practical. Usually organizations have limited budgets for these types of teams and these types of roles. And to keep it fresh, but also to build capacity in the organization, it just makes sense to bring in good people and rotate them through. My strategy is always to get people into a role where they can exercise the greatest influence possible. Sometimes that does mean staying in a role as a facilitator, but quite often it means getting them into a leadership role where they can grow this outside. I get asked a lot. It's kind of a stock question, like, "Hey, what's the proudest accomplishment in your career?" And I'll tell you what, it's never the projects. Everyone forgets about those. It's not ever even the problems you solve. It's really the people that you develop and you see go on to be successful. So I'm actually very proud that several people who work on my teams over the years at different organizations have gone into even C-suite roles at other organizations over time. Um, and those are the types of things you stay connected with for a lifetime too. I'm still in contact with a lot of these people over the years. Just saw a couple last week that I hadn't seen in quite a while, and so for me, that's the most fulfilling part about my job completely, is seeing people go on and grow and develop into these great leaders, and the fact that I may have had even a tiny piece of that makes me very, very happy.
Yeah. No, I mean that is part of the growth, and it is very satisfying to see people that we supported along the journey and their own success. Um, so let me ask more about process or methodology, really around the idea of collaboration, whether it's within the team you're putting together or between your team and another. How do you approach it? Whether, both for yourself as an individual leader, but also more perhaps systematically with your team having to collaborate.
That's a great question. I mean, it always it always starts with need, and it always starts with a shared problem. If you don't have that, it's really hard to manufacture, an alignment. It's really hard to manufacture real collaboration if we actually don't all agree that there's a problem we're even desperate to solve together.
Mhm.
Um, I've tried all those techniques, the burning platforms and the reason for action. And if it's not something we truly need and we don't believe that from the get go, it's always an artificial collaboration. So I really try to understand that at the beginning is, do we agree that we are desperate to solve this problem together? If we're not, it's going to be an uphill battle no matter how you collaborate. No matter whether you pull the dream team together or not, it's going to be really hard to get to come together and solve a problem systematically. There's a few things I think I've learned over the years, that mostly things that don't work. I'm pretty long on people's abilities to solve problems. Kind of goes with the role. I believe when you get the right team, enough time and support, they can solve pretty much any problem. I still believe that. There are some things early in my career that were pretty popular, like you want to have a mixture of folks along the adoption curve as part of the team. I'm here to tell you that has worked 0% of the time in my efforts to collaborate and solve problems. Bringing in people who are actively resistant or don't want to solve the problem never works. I've converted 0 people that way. Maybe it's because I'm not persuasive or charming enough, but I actually just think it's a bad strategy. So right off the bat, you have to look at who's available to solve the problem, and they have to be people who are excited about it, have the shared will and joy to solve problems. The skills, again, I think when you have enough people, you're going to cover off all the bases, so you don't need to have expert problem solvers filling the docket. And the other thing I've learned over the years is the importance of that sponsorship role. Most leaders think they're great at sponsoring these problem solving teams, and very few of them actually are. And sometimes the biggest mistake is actually bringing them on the team as well. It sounds like a great idea. You're going to have access to these leaders who can remove roadblocks and drive influence, but some of them just can't help taking over the problem, or causing a distraction to the team as well. So that's another thing I've struggled with over the years is how do you get great sponsors, and then how do you keep them engaged with while continuing to empower the team to do what they have to do?
Yeah. Those are great pragmatic insights around the nuance of, bringing people together. Um, I think your acknowledgement of sort of 0% success rate on bringing, I think you used the word actively resistant,
Yeah.
well, that mirrors my experience as well. There's one of my old partners, Denny Pauly, who ran all of manufacturing for Chrysler, grew up through the industry, and I'll say a crude way to say this, but he said, "Carry the wounded, shoot the stragglers," and his message was like, some people, they're just not worth bringing along because they are not going to make it. They're not going to catch up. And so maybe it may not be our problem to remove them, but we don't need to always invite them. And going to sponsors, I think that's vital. I don't think we talk about it enough. I actually recently worked on a video course and a white paper on good sponsorship, because it's like, just because you're a leader doesn't make you a good sponsor. And so you already shared one of the pitfalls, which is them taking over. In sponsorship, I just want to ask more around that. Do you focus more on just trying to find the right sponsor who will behave right, or do you try to guide them towards what a good sponsor does?
I try to do both. Sometimes, sometimes you have to engage sponsors just because of their position or their influence as well, whether they're good sponsors or indifferent sponsors as well. So I always like to seek out one that I know is enthusiastic and reliable in this case. But so that also requires you knowing all the potential leadership sponsors, which is a lot of work. It's put a lot of work in to understand that. Again, I've had limited success, I think, quote unquote, educating leaders on how to become a sponsor. The great ones are already humble enough to actually ask that when you engage them the first time, and tell me what you need from me, tell me what the team needs from me. The ones that aren't going to be too interested in what I think being a sponsor is, or here, read the standard template, or check out this change management plan. So where I'm asked to support, I will, as much as possible, but I try not to be too preachy about it to a leadership sponsor who may be less engaged, because I find it turns them off.
Yeah. But it's a pretty useful litmus test. I think you shared a pretty quick one, right? If they start by asking what help you need, then that's not a bad starting point.
Yeah, you got a good one 99% of the time right there.
Yeah. So let's dig into problem solving itself a little bit more. Let's talk about root cause analysis, or just getting to root cause. You work in a field with a lot of knowledge workers. It's heavily regulated. Probably a lot of ways in which it's a challenging environment. How do you approach really getting to I'll say workable root causes in the environment that you find yourself in?
Yeah, it's tricky. A lot of the work, like you said, is knowledge work, which I'm a fan of Roger Martin's, where he describes these as decision factories and not a factory. In a shop floor, we both worked at shop floors. The advantages there, you can see it. Root cause emerges more quickly. In knowledge work, it's actually pretty rare that we have somebody measuring the quality of our decisions. It's pretty rare we even open up the black box or investigate the heuristics that people are using and evaluate decisions. So a lot of the traditional techniques of, hey, let's just ask why 5 times, or let's do a Pareto chart, aren't as effective in the decision factory, I've found over the years. And sometimes the impact of a change to the decision-making process could take a couple of years before you understand the outcomes. So with that being said, one of the better techniques for this is to understand what is our decision-making process. Most people don't even want to acknowledge that they have one.
Mm-hmm.
But the second you start unpacking it, it becomes really clear that in a complex organization that is a decision factory, almost no one actually understands how decisions are made when you ask them. It's only once we have a common understanding of what the process is for making decisions that we start getting in, and these hypotheses start emerging, and that's where you can start playing with cause and getting into it. So it's not unlike a lot of the classic tools or A3 thinking. You do, what is the process for making the decisions? It's a lot different, I find, in knowledge work than health than manufacturing. Those very linear approaches and digging into multiple causes, or is it the machine, just don't yield the same results. Another challenge there is we often don't even understand what the quality of these decisions need to be. We're just busy making them. So it's really hard to assess root cause if we don't even agree on what quality looks like for a lot of these processes, a lot of this knowledge work. So I like to start there, actually, is just, how do we know we're making good decisions? How do we know we're doing them on time and at the lowest possible cost? But it's the quality conversation that gets people really thinking first about, wow, maybe there is something that causes all this rework, or maybe we've never even evaluated the quality of this decision. Why don't we just start there? And it doesn't even occur to people that there's a problem, let alone a cause.
Yeah, I agree fully. In knowledge work, right, we tend to focus a lot on a process flow when the activity where you make a decision is really where it's make or break time, and hard to measure and hard to see, and um, all of that. Well, I really appreciate you sharing, a very pragmatic way, your experience and insight. These are real challenges that, most people out there share, and I'm sure they can benefit from some of your perspectives. So thanks, Ryan.
Pleasure.